You're listening to Ricky and Jimmy on Relationships, the show where we uncover the thoughts and behaviors that are sabotaging your relationship and what you can do about it. Jimmy and I are passionate about sharing the ways that imperfect partners like you and I can shift unhealthy relational dynamics and create closeness. So welcome. Drop your defenses and open your heart, eyes, and ears. Let's learn how to be the best partner we can be together. Hey, we are back after our hiatus. I've really enjoyed all the messages from people saying, where are you guys? So it's good to be back. We've got a great episode for you today. It was Jimmy's idea that today we talk about small and large betrayals, which is a topic I think near and dear to both of us in different ways. Yeah. Jimmy, I was thinking that today maybe you could take the big betrayals and I will take the small ones since I'm the queen of small betrayals. That's a title I've just given myself this morning after a lot of thought about this episode.
Yeah, I think it's such an important topic, like how to heal from those large and small betrayals. But also, I mean, for so many people, I think a lot of relationships do themselves a disservice by not really learning and or taking accountability for the smaller ways that we might betray each other, because betrayal has such a word. You know, most people, when they think of betrayal, they think of cheating. They think of just like large betrayals of lying or covering something up. But the truth is that you can do a lot of damage through small betrayals over time. So we definitely need to, there's multiple ways to heal both sections, but we can't discount the damage that small betrayals can have in a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. When you first suggested this episode, obviously cheating is the first thing that came to my mind. But when I thought about the small betrayals and what those looked like, I did a little research and I was like, man, myself and my partner are betraying each other in small ways on a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly basis. And the wonderful thing about my relationship personally is that I've noticed that we've gotten really good at repairing those. So I'm also going to be able to speak to that. That's another thing that will hopefully encourage listeners, even if you're betraying each other in small ways a lot and all the time, like myself and my partner are, as long as the repairs are there, couples can still have a really wonderful relationship. Yeah. Hey, and I also want to say small betrayals should be expected. I think a lot of folks are under the impression that they might find or mold their partner into somebody who never hurts their feelings in a big or small way. And I don't think that's realistic. So I pride my relationship on being very good at its repairs and not being conflict or betrayal free.
I love that you said that. No, I agree with everything. I mean, you know how I like to bring Gottman into every single possible conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But in one of his books, he says, like, it floored me when I read it. He was like, so many people come into my office and claim that they've never betrayed each other, but like all of these couples are betraying each other and they don't even realize it. And he's like, that is one of the biggest problems in relationships. And I was like, oh my gosh,
sure.
It's so true.
Yeah, I can think back to a time early in this relationship and certainly in all my relationships of the past where I truly thought I was maybe the perfect partner. Oh, I'm never hurting my partner's feelings. It's all our problems are my guy not understanding how to deal with me or not doing things right. And now, thank goodness, I can see the many, many ways that I contribute to the problems and the conflict, because when I couldn't see that, I was an even bigger part of it than I realized.
Yeah. And that's such an important point that we point out that, like, yes, of course, it's super responsible and needed that we own our own ways that we're betraying our partner. But like really the way towards healthy for collectively and the way towards connection and intimacy with your partners is where both of you can see that. Like obviously when it gets lopsided and one person is the only, obviously that's not healthy. And we're not saying that is going to end well. If you're the only one that takes accountability for the ways that you're betraying your partner, it really does require two if we want this thing to be healthy and fulfilling.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
But you're right.
You can get there. You
Yeah,
can
we
get
get
there. You know, I definitely started the ball rolling in this relationship as far as the repairs go. And now my partner has happily joined me. And honestly, he repairs more often than I do now, which is embarrassing because I started the ball rolling
That's
and now he's better
huge.
at it than I am. Yeah.
No, that's a huge testament and an encouragement to a lot of people. Like a lot of people need to hear that sometimes we can be the ones that get the ball rolling and we have to put in the front end of the work, but like it really does
Yeah.
pay off in at least some scenarios. Yeah.
Yep.
I love that.
That's true. Do we want to start with a list or some
100%. Yeah.
examples? Yeah. Of maybe what large and small betrayals are.
Yeah.
Cause I
Let's
know
just
there's a
start with
lot of
small.
small. Okay, great. Yeah. Cause I was going to say, we can't be the only ones going cheating. Of course, that's the only betrayal that comes to mind. So the small betrayals that I found online and that I thought of in my own relationship, these are going to be instances where you or your partner hurt each other's feelings. There might just be a simple misunderstanding. You might not be sensitive to your partner's desires or preferences. Sometimes partners, maybe out with friends, will make their partner the butt of a joke. White lies are small betrayals that actually hurt things quite a bit. You might simply shoot down your partner's attempts to flirt with you, being cold or detached. And honestly, we're not always doing that on purpose, but if it's happening all the time, that can turn into a betrayal. And disrespectful looks and comments, which this is why I said I noticed that I was guilty of this on maybe an hourly basis, because I can have quite the barbed tongue if I'm in a mood, you know, and sometimes I'll get a little bit sassy, and those disrespectful comments are small betrayals that I don't realize probably hurt my partner a lot more than I realize in the moment.
That's really great. Can I add one? Would you call it?
Oh
Would you,
yeah,
this
yeah.
be a
That list is far from exhaustive. Please,
well, yeah,
whatever
no,
popped into your
no.
head, yeah, lay it on
No,
us.
I love that you covered a lot. I would include, I mean, I know this is going to sound like nitpicking, but like, no, you probably already said this, but like not following through on your word. Like if you said you were
I
going to do
didn't say
something and
that.
you don't do it.
That's a fantastic one.
That's a small way that we betray. And you kind of have to, I know it's sometimes hard. The word has so much weight to it, betrayal, but we have to think about it. If you think about it as a way of like either building or breaking down trust in the relationship. If I say I'm going to do something and then I don't do it, I did break trust a little bit. Like, I mean, I get it that in a relationship, we have to have grace. We have to have forgiveness. I get that. We're all kind of making mistakes. And it's just like Ricky said, the main thing that we need to focus on is, can we actually repair this? Because if you can do that, you can get through all the little things that are going to come up in your relationship that just come up naturally. But if you do that consistently, if you say you're going to do something and then you don't, you are breaking their trust. Like it makes sense that the third or fourth or fifth time you say, I'm going to, yeah, I'll do that. They don't really trust that you're going to do it. So you are betraying them in a sense. You're betraying them and the relationship because you're breaking trust in that way. I was going to add, if we were out to dinner somewhere, if we were a couple and I'm like noticeably like looking at other women or making comments about other women, I don't know if that's a large or a small betrayal. It feels like it's right in the middle, where it's like, it's definitely not a small thing, but at the same time, it's not the same category as cheating or, you know, something like that. But I would definitely consider that a betrayal.
Yeah, absolutely. I found a great article too that was talking about small betrayals in the sexual realm. There's a lot more than just sexual contact with somebody else that would be considered
That's so true.
a romantic betrayal. We might be having overly emotional conversations with somebody, kind of leaking that emotional energy outside of our relationship in a way that really hurts our partner or distracts us from being intimate with them. I don't know. For some people, that would be
topic.
Yes, for some people that would be a large betrayal, and for others that would be like, okay, I don't like that, but it's not nearly as serious as a physical transgression.
Yeah. Don't complain about your relationship to somebody else. Yeah.
Totally, sure. So remember that any of these things on this list, we might categorize it a small betrayal, and it might feel like a lot bigger than that to you, and that's okay. From my own relationship, I'm somebody who has great intentions. My goal is always to take care of my partner and be a good partner, but I'm really bad with the follow through. I'm exceptionally quick at saying, I'll take care of that, and then spacing it. That's something that I struggle with. And I remember one time my partner came to me and very vulnerably said, I feel like you don't have my back. And I could tell that even though in my mind, those were really small betrayals, for him, it was way heavier than that. So sometimes the things that we think are not such a big deal are actually impacting our partner quite a bit, despite our good intentions.
Gosh, that's such a good point. Yeah. And I was just, that reminded me of all the little conflicts that Emily and I have had over the years where one of us will kind of just dismiss or, the other partner's feelings. Like invalidation is a small betrayal, like 100%, even if we do it unintentionally, like dismissing somebody's feelings and just, labeling them as too sensitive, like you're just making too big of a deal about this, or just completely invalidating them. Those are 100% small betrayals that add up over time.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing too. Something that seems very small and, not too big of a deal, when done on a daily basis, they really add up and can become the biggest issue in your relationship. They can become large betrayals. So we've got to be careful about those. I'm a little bit worried that my list for how to address small betrayals probably looks almost identical to the way that we also repair large betrayals. So I'm just going to throw that at you right now, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's obviously a lot of similarities in how we repair, of course, but.
Okay. All right. Well, don't let me steamroll you, because hopefully there's a little bit more to the large betrayal, path to repair. So, the very first thing that I've got here is to ask yourself. So the betrayals happened, right? And you're like, all right, I'm going to do something about this. It's time for repair. The first thing to ask ourselves is, are we both in a good place to repair? Because you might be feeling like now's the time that I want to fix this, and your partner might be in a lousy spot for that. And that's not a recipe for success. I think it was actually just last night that I approached my partner, and we were having a little tiff, and I was like, hey, I don't want to be mad at you anymore. I want to fix this. And he said, I'm not done being upset about this. And I was like, oh no, this is it. He's not ready. So I literally had to go do something else until he finally, it was like an hour later. He's like, all right, now I'm ready. And I was really upset that he didn't want to repair right away. But now in retrospect, that conversation wouldn't have gone very well if he wasn't ready for it. And thank goodness I have a partner who it wasn't a no, it was a not yet. And he was very self-aware, at that time. I was like, this isn't a good time for me to talk to her about this. I still need to work through it a little bit. So timing is crucial, I think, when it comes to repair, and making sure that both partners are there for it. Do you have thoughts on that one?
No, that's such a good idea. I mean, that's such a good insight. And it's nice. I mean, like you said, it's nice to have a partner that can be honest and say, I'm not there yet, but I want to get there. Like that's a big difference between I'm not there yet and I don't plan to get there. There's a big difference between we both know where we want to end up. We want to end up to where we can talk about this tonight and do it in a respectful way, versus obviously what avoidance looks like, which is just, I don't want to deal with this problem
ever.
So we're certainly not advocating for that.
Yeah. Some good questions to ask to find out if you guys are both in a good spot. Are both of us regulated enough? Which means you don't want one partner with steam coming out of their ears. You don't want one partner who's actively crying. Even if you're having trouble seeing things objectively, you might be more dysregulated than you realize. Which brings us to the next point. in checking if both people are ready for repair. Am I ready to see both sides of this? That is a tough one for me. In assessing my readiness, sometimes I find myself in my tunnel vision place where I just can't even see his side at all. And I try to think of things that he might say for his side, and my brain is still going, that's stupid. That's not right. And if you're still there, you might not be in a good spot to repair. But depending on how your relationship is, a good conversation might be able to bring you to their side also. So I don't know.
No, I love that.
Yeah, if you're just in tunnel vision land where you're like, I'm right, there's no possible way they could be wrong, might not be ready to repair yet. And the last
people
thing
could just get that right. That alone changes the entire dynamic of the conversation. Can you imagine if two people actually were like, you know what? I want to see your side of this. Like, I want to understand your side of this. The other person's like, no, I want to understand your side of this. I mean, good Lord, you could solve a lot of conflicts with just those two sentences.
Hard to imagine conflict even existing in a relationship like that, but you have to be ready for that spot. Sometimes we're still sitting in our anger, you know?
Absolutely.
I ask myself too, could I put myself in his shoes to feel his feelings, even if it's just for a second? And if I can do that, then I'm probably okay to come to the conversation. So anyway, I can move on to the next one unless you've got
I love it.
some of that. Okay, great. So the next stage, both of you are ready for that conversation. You come to the table. Usually it's very literally the table. That's where we have a lot of these conversations, me and my partner. And then it's time to share how we both feel. And that's rough. It's not easy. In my mind, I'm going back to that table. And even if both people are calm, the fight is still unresolved. You're still going to have those strong feelings about it. So this is usually the part where I start crying because I have trouble talking about those big feelings without getting all weepy. And this is usually the part where he starts getting a little heated because I think that's where he goes when the big feelings come up.
And that's not a dangerous combination, but that is a very sensitive combination. Like
it can be, yeah.
Because a lot of people, I mean, I know I can get very emotional during conflict. Like I get very overwhelmed. I'm not a crier, but I can feel what the crier is probably feeling. Just that, like, it's not like you meant to cry. It just starts to, you just feel so overwhelmed that you just start crying. And unfortunately, people like you probably like start apologizing. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cry. You shouldn't be apologizing. We really need to remind people that like, that is a normal response that you're going through and that you shouldn't feel shame about that. You shouldn't feel bad about that. You shouldn't feel like you're weak. You should not feel any of those. Like, I mean, I know it's not nice to say like, you shouldn't feel that. It makes sense that you feel that, but like, don't let that translate into your brain as like, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
Have self-compassion. And I'm better at it now. I know that those emotional responses are perfectly okay. And my partner's better at it. In the beginning, when I would cry immediately as soon as we started talking about a conflict, that would be really tough for him. He didn't like seeing me like that. He felt like the bad guy. And we've had many conversations now where I said, hey, if we're talking about big stuff, I'm just going to start crying. Like, don't let that bother you. That's like normal. That's par for Ricky beginning a conversation like this. And so now it's actually pretty nice. He's able to sit quietly or give my hand a little pat or something. And it's okay for me to cry at the beginning of the conversation. That's
a really good point for any Franks that are courageous enough to listen to this. And, you're on that long car ride and your wife made you listen to us, but we're grateful that you're here. But like, you really need to see that as like, if your partner starts crying, it's not because they're trying to be manipulative. Mm-mm. It's not because they're just so weak and you like, and you might have a tendency, I'm trying to get into Frank's brain right now. You might have a tendency to see it as they're trying to play this off as they're the victim and I'm the bad guy here. I want you to resist those urges. There's probably a 99% chance that your partner is not trying to manipulate you in this instance. They're just overwhelmed. And if you could just move towards them with some safety, if you could see that as like, oh, they're crying, that means that what they're feeling and what they're saying is super important to them. And they're like, their body is genuinely potentially afraid of what will happen if they express these things. So I'm going to move towards them and make sure that they know that this is a safe place.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And it can help to say that too. Like, I mean, having my partner say, like, it's okay that you're crying right now. Like, that's, it's like, don't feel bad about it, especially when I'm apologizing. And,
It's so
and
important.
if I may say, for the partners that cry, I like your statistic there. We don't have that backed up, but 99% of the time it's just an overwhelmed response. It's not something that we're doing on purpose.
I'm sure it happens that it's manipulative, but in the vast majority of cases,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, not very often at all. Mm-hmm. So the really tough part about this part where we're sharing how we feel about it is you got to try to do that without accusing the other person of anything. And that is really tough, because most of the time I want to say, I'm upset because you said this, and that shuts the person down immediately. So let's have a quick lesson in nonviolent communication. My favorite thing ever. When we're sharing how we feel about something, we got to try not to use the word you. And that's rough, but that might sound more like, I feel sad because when I hear things that feel disrespectful to me, it makes me feel like a little kid again, getting talked down to. And I can't handle that. And I feel like that's what was happening. And when I phrase it like that delicately, because we care about our partner and we don't want to shut them down, they're more likely to be able to hear, okay, my partner's very upset about that. When they feel like we're accusing them of something, obviously they're going to go into defensive mode, like anybody does. That doesn't make them a bad guy or somebody who sucks at listening. It's just, I'm getting a lot of flack about this on the account lately, because I think everybody wants a partner who can handle those kinds of accusations. Like I've heard a lot of people say, I don't want to have to walk on eggshells or baby step or gentle parent my partner. I want to be able to tell them exactly what they did that hurts. And it's, of course you want to do that, but have you ever been able to kindly and I don't know, passively listen to someone accuse you of something? Because I struggle with that a lot. Yeah. So it's weird, I think, that we expect our partner to be able to handle words that we probably couldn't handle,
Yeah. I have two thoughts on that. Every time I say two, I always forget both of the thoughts. One,
at least one.
At least one. I can usually remember the one. Yes, you 100% should not be, there is accusatory language. You make me feel so blank.
Right.
For people who are only listening, I'm pointing my finger in the air at the person, because that's how we can accuse people. Like, you do these things all the time. You never do this. You always do that. And you make me feel so mad. Well, that, of course, that just elicits, like, well, naturally, I'm going to defend myself. You just said I never take out the trash. Like, what are you talking about? I've taken the trash out every day this week. Like, so of course we're going to latch on to that specific thing. So we need to do our absolute best. And Ricky and I have done countless episodes on like how to handle conflict. So if you're really interested in it, we did like a 2-hour episode for free, where you can go and listen to follow all those instructions and you'll be perfectly fine. But yeah, so avoid accusatory language, avoid criticism, avoid the you never and you always. And then the second thing I was going to say is the people that say, well, my partner it's usually women that are talking about men. Well, my partner needs to be a grown man. Like, I should be able to tell him whatever I want. And
I've seen.
I know that they don't say it like that. They don't say I should be able to tell him whatever I want, but he should be able to handle it. I can raise my voice to him. I can tell him exactly what he did wrong, and he should just be able to handle it. Here's all I'm going to say about that. If that's you, I guarantee you that man is also not doing the same thing to you. I bet that he is not raising his voice and pointing his finger in your face and telling you all the things that you didn't do. And you're going, tell me more. I guarantee you that you're not doing that. Jimmy. I can guarantee you that the relationship dynamic is such that he doesn't voice his concerns, whether you could ask him the question, well, why don't you? Some men are just like, well, I just don't see a reason I'm bringing it up. Like, what's the point? Other times they're like, well, I don't bring my feelings up because, like, you would never listen to them in the first place. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying that the majority of the people that are like, I should be able to talk to my partner however I want, you're not getting that back to you, guaranteed.
Right. Well, I think this goes way back into the do unto others as you would want done unto you, right?
Yeah.
I don't want my partner to feel entitled to speak however he wants to me. I should be able to accuse
Certainly
Ricky
not.
of whatever I want. I don't want that coming at me. And therefore, I don't put that on him on purpose.
Yeah.
I definitely am guilty of it sometimes, but
with just a little bit of effort, I think that we can both come to an agreement on like, hey, let's just not accuse and criticize each
Yes.
other. Okay, cool. Hey, if you have a concern, I want to listen and empathize with you. Like, let's just try those things. Yeah.
Right. So the next step is to share your reality vulnerably. And I know the folks that want to be able to say whatever they want feel very strongly about that, but I've never found that to be as successful as when I say something really vulnerable, like I'm feeling really lonely in this. I mean, that's the kind of thing that moves my partner to help me and to listen and to be part of the solution. So being vulnerable about your triggers, that's tough, being vulnerable about why something is so hard for you because of how something's gone down in the past. That's been very effective. When I share with my partner how something came to be difficult for me because of a past experience that was very painful, he just melts like butter. It's not a defensive, angry, trying to clear his name person that I'm talking to in that scenario.
Can I point
yeah,
to
no,
that
please. I
on
know.
why-
I'm kind of
I don't want to interrupt
derailed.
you. No. You're doing a great job. But from a man's perspective, and I don't say that anybody that watches the podcast very much. I don't usually say from a man's perspective because I'm not the quintessential, from a man's perspective. Let me tell you what the man feels like.
Right.
But
right.
occasionally you say things and I'm like, that from a man, when a man hears you say like, hey, this is what happened and this is how I'm feeling because of like these things in the past. You don't have to add this, but you could almost say like, I was just hoping you could help me with this. Like, can you help me? Like,
oh yeah.
Cause it's almost like most men, the vast majority of men would say, if you ask them, like, do you want to help your partner? Like, do you want to be seen as like helpful? Do you want to be seen as like, like you care about her? They would all say yes. And so when you kind of come at it from that language of like, you're taking accountability for your own feelings, but you're also like inviting us to like, hey, you could help me with this.
Yeah.
And not in the
wonderful.
not in the sense of like that I just need help. I can't do it on my own. It's more like you could really help me feel valued by doing X, Y, and Z. And most men are like, I want to get it right for you. Like I want you to feel valued. And so,
yes. I love that you said that because my partner, he's a doer, he's a fixer. I think that really resonates with a lot of men specifically. So when I say, hey, I'm going to reveal some of my past and why this is such a big deal for me, suddenly it kind of gives him a way to fix, a way to do. And he does, he lights up, he melts like butter because suddenly he feels something for me in that moment. And then he kind of steps into his power like, okay, now I know, I understand this and I know a way forward.
Oh, most men are doers. I mean, I'm sure most women are doers too, but gosh, most men are doers and sometimes they're not great at feelers, but being feelers, but they're great at doers. And when you give them like an action, like this is how you can really help me to feel valued. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people that are like, no, I tell my man exactly what he needs to do. He still doesn't do it. I get that. Totally get that. But there's a lot of men that also would, if I polled most men, they'd be like, I just don't know what to do. She came to me and told me that she was feeling lonely. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like, so it really helps when it's like, I'm feeling this. Can you help me understand it? Can we understand it together? And also like, this would also help me to feel really valued right now or in the future.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a, what do I want to call it? Like a magic move here. This is, I don't want to say it's manipulative because it's for the good of the relationship, but the next magic step is to own your part of it. That is rough. That's rough. But I've noticed that in that moment, after I reveal my past and or why something is so important to me, if I can own my part of the conflict right there in that moment, that really opens things up. That really opens him up. It breaks all the walls down. When I say, I'm trying to think, it's probably more helpful if I have like an example, but in this example, let me see, what could I be doing where I'm owning my part of it? I'm saying it really hurt my feelings when you didn't, I don't know, you made yourself a sandwich yesterday and you didn't make one for me. And I really felt left out, because sometimes in my family growing up, I would notice the food would be gone and I would want something and everybody ate it and nobody offered me any. And that really hurt. So owning your part of it could look like you saying, like, I know I'd kind of been hiding in my room all afternoon. Maybe you thought that I wanted some space instead of a sandwich. So I was hiding in my room, and that probably, I'm feeling derailed right here, Jimmy, but you see where I'm getting with that, right?
I have a good example that you use all the time. So you could say, I'm feeling lonely. This would be like, let's say you're feeling lonely because, he hasn't been asking you to go out on dates. He's been like working really a lot, working overtime, and kind of deprioritized. Like he used to go out on dates, but yada, yada. So you're like, hey, I'm just feeling kind of lonely. Like you haven't ever, we haven't gone on any dates, and you could own your part. You can still feel lonely and you can still feel kind of like unprioritized, but you can own your part because it's like, I recognize that I didn't necessarily communicate how important that was to me.
There it is. Good. Yeah.
So both can be true. I'm feeling lonely.
Yeah.
I also didn't communicate how important that is to me. And I'm realizing now that I love that you take me out, and I've really felt disconnected lately or lonely.
Yeah. And it's kind of magical, because I think when I step into the ring a little bit, like, hey,
so true.
This is also partly on me. It makes it easier for my partner to talk about what he did wrong. Right? It's not just everybody attack my partner. It's like, hey, I'm partly at fault here too. And that's a magical turning point during our conflict conversations, for sure.
It's so true. There's so many people, men especially, because the majority in a heterosexual relationship, I don't mean to say normal, but in a heterosexual relationship, it's usually the woman that brings up complaints or concerns or feelings more than the man. That's just studied. That's not like a stereotype. And there would be a lot of men that would say, my partner doesn't take any accountability. Like there's no accountability. She doesn't own any of her part. So that really, I'm not saying that that's going to guarantee that he owns his part, but like that really is the first step to.
It helps a lot. It helps a lot. It does. I'm just in personal experience. I used to be the partner that all I did was accuse my person of being the bad guy. And that never went well, ever. But when I can say, hey, I've been thinking about it and I've got part of this too, then it's two people having a conversation. It's not one person who's a punching bag who's done everything wrong.
Yeah. Because it doesn't need to be a punching bag. It's just about understanding. That's why not to make this into a conflict session, but like conflict is an opportunity to learn more about your partner. Yes.
I was just reading that on one of the Gottman's web pages this morning, that conflict is an opportunity for intimacy. And I know those of us who are terrified of conflict, it's hard to see it that way. But those moments after my partner and I figure out what happened and what the other person needs, and we're listening to each other, sometimes that's better than the good times. I know that's a weird thing to say, but I've found a lot of conflict repair is some of my favorite memories with him. So, so I've got the last step if you're ready for it.
Let's do it.
The last step is to make a plan for change. I think a lot of people leave this step out because at that point, you're both feeling pretty good about things. You're not angry at them anymore. It's tempting to just drop it, but that's when you find the subject coming up over and over. There's a lot of couples who fight over the same thing every single day. So here's where we make a plan for change. We need to work together. This should ideally be a 2-person buy-in kind of thing where we make a plan to change at least one aspect of this. You don't have to change the whole thing. You don't have to sit around hoping that your partner becomes a completely different person, but do something so that this does not go down exactly the same way in the future. A very common reoccurring argument for my partner and I would be the litter box. I hate that that's the one, but people have pets. This is just the one that comes to mind.
At least it's not the dishes this time.
At least it's not the dishes. Gosh, broken record, Ricky. So with the litter box, my partner used to sit around and wish that I would change into somebody who cleaned that thing with the frequency that he would. But instead of just dropping the conflict after we both talked about how we felt, the change that we made was I put a little sign, I put a little note right above it that I could see on a regular basis. And this was a while ago. I don't remember what it said, but I mean, it was something along the lines of like, do this for Chris or do this for your relationship. And I stopped viewing the litter box as this horrible chore that I hated. And it became a small way that I can make my relationship better. And that little note was the change that made it so that argument is not still popping up. That's nice. It was the little note is the something different. It's not a good plan to just hope that you remember something that you never remember in the past. You got to do maybe set a recurring alarm on your phone until something becomes a habit or those. I don't know. I'm sure you can think of some ways that you can.
No, people
Jimmy,
gloss
what
over
about
that.
Yeah.
People gloss over that exact technique that you just said, but like that will change your relationship alone. I constantly tell people set more reminders. Nobody does
absolutely.
it. Nobody ever does it.
Right. Nobody does it. It works
like
though.
Frank will do it
it
tonight. Yeah. He'll set a reminder over something and he'll be like, wow, that actually worked. So yeah, I mean, you should be setting.
What's the thing?
Yeah.
I think Chris has a reminder on scheduling dates, right? Because it's not something that my partner would ever think of. So so
there's going to be so many things that your partner. This can go back to love languages. This can go back to anything. Like
so many.
You have reminders on your phone. Like I'm kind of getting more into like the business world of this industry, and I have to like remind myself, oh, I have this meeting coming up. Like this, I set reminders for important things that are coming up. I don't want to forget, especially because I'm not a meeting guy. I don't go to meetings. Right. I'm usually, it's like this just so, especially being a stay-at-home dad, and so I have to set reminders because I just don't think like that. I don't think in the term of business meetings. I don't think in so it's the same thing. There's a lot of men out there that just don't think, well, I don't remember to set dates or I don't remember to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can set reminders because you do that all the time for important business meetings and all this other stuff. So like you can do that and you both should be doing that. So anyways, I just want to acknowledge just to rehash a couple of things. Cause like, I think you did a fantastic job at like talking about from your standpoint, like you coming to that partner and how to do that respectfully. So I just want to like reiterate.
Oh yeah. Let's
what
hear the
I
other
should
side.
do, because repair isn't simply just one-sided. There is an element where we should just do our part. We should not be expecting our partner. If we have something we need to apologize for, or if we have a feeling that we need to share, but this thing really comes together when we both, can do what Ricky said. So, so the first thing I would do is like acknowledge what you're feeling. So if you came to me telling me that you felt lonely because I don't plan dates anymore, I would acknowledge that and validate that. Like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense that you're feeling lonely. So giving a quick summary of what that person brought up to you is like super validating. And it tells that person like, I was paying attention. I heard you. Thank you for telling me is a great, it's a wonderful thing to say to somebody who's sharing their heart. And just like we said in the beginning with Ricky's example of like being overwhelmed sometimes, this is really, really hard. This stuff is so hard. So if somebody has the courage to be vulnerable with you and be like, hey, it doesn't matter what it's about. Like it could be about anything. If they're doing it in the correct way, if they're sharing their feelings vulnerably and like, hey, when this happened, this is how I'm feeling. That took a lot of courage, and we should be, the very least that you should be doing is like, thank you so much for telling me. That should be the environment that you're creating. Thank you so much for telling me.
Yeah, that's a safety builder, a big one. Yeah. That sentence right there should become a regular part of your vocabulary. Anytime your partner comes to you with something, even if you're not ready to talk about it right now, thank you for bringing this up is a big one. Like,
so
thanks
important.
for telling me what was bugging you.
Yeah. So then we try to understand where they got to that feeling. So I would ask certain questions. What led you to feel that way? Or maybe they told you what led you to feel that way. And then that's when you would go into, just remember, you're trying to make sense. Their feelings and experience make sense to them. So I'm not saying that don't think about it as like right or wrong. Think about it as like, if I love this person and if I want to build a relationship with this person, then I need to like move in their direction when they're vulnerably and respectfully bringing their feelings up. So I have to think about it from that mindset that this makes sense to that person. So I try to understand where they're coming from, and then I can say the words, oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense that you felt that way. I get that. And that's very validating. So then we can go to what Ricky said is own your part. You're both owning your part, just like we said. So that is a huge, like, once you both understand each other, once you both are owning your part, and then you can talk about what Ricky talked about, where it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do differently next time? And that's essentially how you repair. If you follow through on that, now if you just break it again, a week later, you just completely botch it, and you don't change it all, then of course the repair process gets a little harder next time, and yada yada yada. But that's essentially how you repair small betrayals, right?
Yeah. I always, Jimmy and I, in case this is your first episode, not likely, but for the first episode, folks, we like to refer to our fictional couple, Frank and Carol. And Frank is probably the more bumbling, less self-aware, and Carol is the one who's more upset about things and bringing things up all the time. I honestly relate more often to Frank, so I'm going to speak on behalf of the more bumbling, dropping the ball partner. I regularly promise to do things different to my partner and then promptly forget about that or do the complete opposite. That happens on a regular basis for me. It's something I'm working on. But if that's you, if you're listening to this and you recognize yourself as the partner who's over promising and under delivering, it's good to acknowledge that to your partner and how hurtful that can be to them. I know that ideally my partner just wants to see things get better and things change, but I think it does help when I say, I know how frustrating it is for you, that I'm not really good at this and I want to be better. Here's something that I'm going to do different. Here's a concrete change that I'm going to make. Sometimes those alarms aren't working for me. Sometimes my alarm goes off to do the litter box and I silence the alarm and I keep doing what I'm going to do. So I'll say, all right, I want to acknowledge that didn't work. And now here's another step that I'm going to do this differently. It might not work, but I'm going to try it and hope for the best because I want good things for our relationship. Giving each other an extra amount of grace, especially in a marriage, I think is super essential. I've been really frustrated lately by the amount of comments I see online from people who are expecting their partners to be perfect. As a very imperfect partner myself, I think giving each other grace and doing what we can to do things differently so that the same thing doesn't keep happening is essential. Anyway, that's my soapbox. I'm going to step off that. Obviously, that came from a really, really deep place there, Jimmy. I've been struggling with that one myself and disheartened by the things I've been seeing online. So, anyway.
I do. Oh, I love listening to what you have to say. I do, however, want to move on because I don't want the people who are, there's probably a lot of people that are waiting to hear what we have to say about how to heal large betrayals. That's a big, big topic. I will give you a disclaimer right off the bat, that we are probably not going to give you the information that you're hoping for, because I know what it's like to just want to heal from large betrayals, and you're hoping that there's just this magic solution, and you're just hoping like there's got to be this perfect combination. And I hate to tell you, but like there really isn't a like secret. There's not a secret. It's like, it super sucks. And I'm sure we're going to get into it over the next 20 minutes of just like how bad this can suck. And like, of course there's things that we can do, but I can promise you that I can list all the things that we can do. And at the end of it, you're going to be like, yeah, but even if all that happens, like, I still don't know if am I going to feel better? And the answer might be, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Like you might not feel better, because you have to remember that what you went through was like traumatic in a sense. Like you have to view it as like, I went through a trauma, and now it's like, and now I'm looking for like a secret to how to feel better after trauma. And we have to remember that's like asking a car accident victim, like you got a really bad car accident and they're like broken bones and broken ribs, and you're in the hospital completely bruised up. And they're like, how can I feel better a week from now? And you're like, you're not gonna feel better a week from now. Like you might heal over time. Like there's certain things that the doctors can do. Like there's certain things that can be done, but there's also certain things that like, this leg might not always work the way it used to. And that's just what reality is now. And that's the same kind of things that we're talking about when it comes to like healing large betrayals. Like, will this ever be like it was again? Maybe not. Like maybe not. And when a massive betrayal happens, it's like a schism in it fractures like the entire timeline in a sense. And it's like, hey, can we go back to that old timeline? Like, no, you can't.
Wow.
And so, it's very, you have to view it in a different sense. Does that mean it's hopeless? No, there's new timelines, and there's new hope, and there's certain things that can happen that we can make this timeline the best possible timeline. Is it going to be like the old one? No. And sometimes you don't want it to be like the old one, because the old timeline was broken. Like you needed a new timeline, but it might not be the timeline that you necessarily think it, might not think that that's the way it's supposed to be. So I understand that's very confusing, but
no, I think that was the perfect metaphor. These large betrayals, I love the question. I want to feel better in a week. It's like these are so big that you probably aren't going to feel better in a week. But I wanted to start us off with a list of some big betrayals, because I did run into some things online that were different than just sexual infidelity. One partner incurring a massive amount of debt, especially secretly. That is a huge betrayal. Someone falling in love with someone else. I know nobody intends to do that, but that is a massive betrayal, especially in a monogamous relationship where you agreed not to do that. Maybe a partner being a compulsive liar about issues large or small. But if lying is happening on a regular basis, that's a big betrayal. And the other one I found was a partner who regularly withholds sexual intimacy in order to punish someone. That is also a large betrayal. I know that one can get sticky. I'm saying intentional withholding.
Right. Another large betrayal is like, if you had a death in the family, like let's say that your grandmother died and you were so close with her, and your partner kind of just like, they just don't like, they're not showing up for you. Like you want them to go to the funeral with you. Instead, they're like, I'm sorry, I've got a work meeting. Like I can't miss this thing. And you just feel so betrayed. Like, this was so important. Or maybe in the case of like a miscarriage, you have a miscarriage and your partner, maybe they just, you informed them, you had a moment where you both kind of felt terrible about it, and you kind of hugged, and then they kind of just went off and did their own thing. I mean, obviously, it would be the guy,
or they don't know how to support you.
Yeah, or they don't, and that might be a reason why they went off. And I heard of a guy that went off and he went to his softball game because he was like, "What else am I supposed to do? Like, what am I just supposed to sit around and cry? Like, because that's his way of coping. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that he had his own reasons of like, well, I'm just going to go distract myself and go to I'm going to go to my softball game. Whereas his partner felt incredibly betrayed. Like, I
Yes.
just went through this insanely traumatic event and you're just gone. You're just gone.
Yeah.
You're not here. So those are big betrayals that we have to work through.
I think it's important for us to bring up too that the partner that's committing the big betrayal probably has in their mind a good reason for it. And that doesn't make it right, but I just want us to peek inside our partner's brain for a second and know that the partner who's incurring lots of debt or falling in love with someone else or compulsively lying, they're not monsters who are trying to make your life horrible. They're human beings who are coping with something in a way that's not working. So that's probably...
That does not mean that you have to give them grace.
Oh, absolutely not.
We're
No,
not saying
you don't.
But
having a little peek into their head and why they may have done something for a reason other than to hurt my partner is probably going to be helpful to the healing process. I don't know. I'm sure you were going to get there, Jimmy. I hope I didn't just spoil.
No, you're process. Fine. I mean, these are obviously different, and you have to handle them differently. Obviously, there's not just like one solution to it. But I mean, it's probably best if we just stick to cheating in this sense, because like obviously. Okay. I'm comfortable opening up about that, and you can ask me any questions that you want. And I can tell you, in my opinion, some of the only ways, let me put it that way. There's, in my opinion, there's some ways that you have to do certain things if you're ever going to get to healing on the other side. So one of those things is, there has to be some sort of like immediate transparency. So like if your so when I disclosed that I had cheated, or for people who don't know that, I'm so sorry that I'm dropping that on you now, but I tragically cheated on my wife earlier in our marriage. And we've obviously been on a long healing journey. That's kind of what started all this. It was years and years before I created any content, but that's kind of what started me on this journey of self-reflection and learning about relationships and how to heal and all that stuff. So, so there has to be some immediate transparency, as in, like you can't cheat on your partner and then like still like, I'm not going to let you look at my phone. This is my phone. Right. This is my privacy. Right. That isn't a thing. So if God forbid you're in a situation where your partner cheated on you and then now they want to still have all this privacy, that relationship is over, in my opinion. You can stay together. You're going to be miserable because there's not going to be healing.
Right. And Jimmy, I would say that that's an excellent first step for any of those big betrayals that I talked about. Let's say you're the partner who incurred lots of debt. You don't get financial privacy anymore, you know?
Correct.
Let's say you're the partner who's been withholding sexual intimacy to punish. You suddenly have to be very transparent about how you're feeling about things. You don't get to hide all your emotions. Now you have to talk about them, you know?
Yeah,
Transparency
right.
is an amazing first step to repair after a large betrayal like that.
And one theme that you're going to see in all this, we've already kind of gone over how to heal the small betrayals. It's practically the same process, but done when you heal a small betrayal, you can like, it's kind of like a small cut that you can like, it heals in a couple days. Like, okay, it's already healed. Yeah, whereas large betrayals are like a knife, a wound that closes very slowly, but it's the same process essentially. So you can't neglect the steps that we just talked about, because those are going to be even more important when that partner isn't just like, hey, I feel lonely. They're like, hey, I feel broken. Like I feel when someone gets cheated on, that causes like a massive rupture in their, I've never asked you this question. I hope that you've never been cheated on in any of your relationships.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Not that I know of.
Yeah. But you can imagine that it causes you to, it's a traumatic event. Like mentally, you can't think anymore. You can't, I can't fathom how difficult that process is after your partner discloses to you that what they did. I mean, everything goes through your mind. Like, I'm not good enough. I must not be, I mean, how can we ever heal from this? How could they do this to me? I mean, what is my life going to be like now? Like, this is, I don't even know. You probably want two things simultaneously. Like, I want this relationship to go back to the way it was. I want things to heal, but at the same time, like, I don't even know if I want to be with you anymore. Like, why would I want to be with you? But at the same time, I have this desire, like, I want to be with you and I want this to work, but I don't even know if it can work. And that, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, so many things are common. And what they're finding is that they're all, like I said, there's a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. There's depression and there's feelings of rejection and shame and people feel numb. You know, people have panic attacks because it's just such a destructive event within the person themselves and the relationship. So, I mean, we're talking about an explosion, you know, of pain and betrayal. So.
I think that's why that car crash metaphor was so perfect, though. You know, the small betrayals I talked about in the beginning of the episode are like a cut, and the large betrayals can be like running your partner over with a car. You know, that's why it's not going to feel better immediately. We don't have a magic formula that just makes everything better. It's more complicated. The small steps are important, but we've got more steps because there's more damage.
Yeah. So can we heal after a large betrayal? Yes. But in my opinion, there's certain things that need to be done. One, transparency, like we talked about. You lose privacy. You don't have. Now, that's not to say that your partner can just like, this is why, I don't know why we haven't said this yet, but this is why most of this stuff should be done in front of a therapist. Like most of this stuff should be done because you're going to have a lot of questions. Okay, well, I want to know every time you talk to him. I want to know every time you talk to her. I want to know, especially what you guys did. I want to know this and I want to know that. And while your questions make sense, you want to make sense of all this. You're trying your best to, but you have to remember that sometimes the answers you think you want are not actually going to make you feel better. And so you need to be doing this in front of a therapist because the therapist will be able to tell you, hey, I don't think what you want right now is just for all your questions to be answered. I think what you want is just to feel safe. And right now, you can't feel safe in this. You're just trying to make sense of all this by like, maybe if I know all the details, I can feel safe, but that's not always going to be a good thing. You might hear some things and just things might get described to you that you asked for, but when you get them, that's now in your head forever. Yeah. And you can't go back. And I'm not saying that they should keep secrets from you because, like, of course, that's another point that we would get to. Like, that's part of the transparency. Like, they need to be completely open. There is no more secrets. Like, if this relationship is going to heal, there's no more secrets. But there's some things that you might not necessarily want to know. If you're going to stay in this relationship forever, you might not want that in your head forever. And so that's something a therapist will be able to help you navigate. That's not something that I can just answer for you right now. Yeah.
That was a great caveat. A way to add nuance to this too, because there is a lot of nuance with
there's so much nuance.
Big betrayals. I'm glad that you said that. Sometimes those big betrayals do require a third party, like a therapist, to step in and help you guys navigate what those conversations and boundaries look like going forward.
Yeah. The next thing. Gosh, I was gonna go to something else and then I lost it. Sorry. So obviously we have to fully understand our partner's pain. So the one thing that we can't do, and the one thing that people do so often, is they essentially don't take any accountability for which is insane to think about, but it just goes back to how people struggle with their own shame. So when people cheat, you would think, well, they would obviously take accountability, but so many people don't. They're like, they will do the worst thing that you can do, which is either say it meant nothing. It was just a one night stand, which is a terrible thing to say because like we say it meant nothing, but it didn't mean nothing to your partner. It meant everything to your partner. And so we should never, ever say it meant nothing. Two, we will do the worst thing where we will blame our other partner. You know, this wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have just, or if you would have just, one of the two, but we essentially blame the other person. So those two things, like, I mean, if you could, like, that will handicap your healing so intensely. Like, so it's in my opinion that if you have a relationship where someone cheated and they don't want to do any transparency, they don't want to go to counseling about it, they blame you, or they tell you, or they kind of invalidate your hurt, that isn't a sustainable relationship. Like, you deserve so much more than that. And I know that this is really hard coming from someone who cheated. Like, obviously I get it. That's so hard to conceptualize, but, like, you never deserve for somebody to do that to you. Like,
I see what you're saying to someone who's committed a large betrayal and is not able to take personal responsibility for it is somebody who's going to be committing that betrayal again, right?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
So that's, if you want the kind of relationship where that betrayal is happening over and over again, continue the relationship with somebody who's not willing to admit that they did something egregiously wrong and change something, right? I see what you're saying.
And don't get me wrong, it's so hard to hold that person accountable, but like, this is unfortunately one of those moments that you literally have to hold that person accountable.
Yes.
There's
So there's no other path forward. I like the nuance that we've got going here. For the small betrayals section, giving your partner grace and being extra understanding is very, very important. For the large betrayals, it's definitely easy to give your partner too much grace. You need somebody during those big betrayals who is saying, I know that I did something wrong. Here's how I messed up. That's essential.
It's essential. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, so you, like, you can get to it's sometimes our brain goes to, but don't you think that there was things in the relationship that don't focus on the relationship. When there's large betrayals, there's a time frame where we have to only focus on the person who was betrayed. And it's my job as the betrayer to completely to do those small steps over and over again, to have those conversations where I acknowledge your pain. I understand how deeply I hurt you. I understand that how amazingly difficult this must be for you. And, or maybe we shouldn't say, I understand. Maybe it's better to say, I can't understand how difficult this process is for you. There is no excuse. Obviously I know that what I did was so wrong. And even if your partner's like, well, was it something I did? Was it something in the relationship? It's very mature of you to say, we can talk about that with the counselor at a later time, but right now we just need to focus on your pain. And you need to properly express how hard this is and have someone be able to say, like, you're so right. I'm so sorry. The first step to healing is those moments when the betrayed partner is like just bawling their eyes out about how hard this is. And the person who betrayed them is also crying and they're like, I'm so sorry. But they're not crying from the standpoint of, I'm so sorry. I'm such a terrible person. I'm such a piece of crap. It's not that. It's remorse. It's genuine remorse. You have to get to the point where it's genuine remorse. And I'm not saying that please don't hear me and say that that's going to solve everything. Like that, that's not going to solve everything. Just because your partner is genuinely sorry, you're like, good for you, genuinely sorry. You're like, you should be freaking genuinely sorry. Like, do you understand what you did? Like, so we're not saying that solves everything. We're just saying that what we're looking at is we're looking at 2 years from now. Can we be in a successful, healthy relationship 2 years from now, where we're talking about what to do right now? Like, we're not saying this is going to heal everything. We're saying you have a long journey ahead of you, but if you don't do these for certain steps, you'll never reach that destination. Right.
Genuine remorse is essential to large betrayal repair. It's not something that you can leave out. It's Correct. Not the thing that will solve it on its own. Right. I think that's what you mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to, what do you think the next step should be while I see where I see my notes? Oh, you know what I want to talk about? I want to talk about what the betrayed partner has to do. Because we talked about, you have to hold them accountable. You also have to, part of holding them accountable is you that's a boundary that you have to start setting. And normally we talk about boundaries as like, I don't need the other person to do something. This is just about what I'm going to do. But
Right.
you can think about it in the sense of like, okay, well, a boundary for me after I've been betrayed is my partner has to take, like, I have to be in a relationship where my partner can take accountability for a large betrayal. Like, I get it that that's kind of like confusing, but that's you can think, if you don't want to use the term boundary, you can think of non-negotiable. Like it's a non-negotiable for me to stay in a relationship where there's been a large betrayal and my partner refuses to take accountability. So, yeah.
Well, another non-negotiable could be if this keeps happening, right? If this happens again, that could be a non-negotiable. And the proper term would be boundary, but that one gets hard for people to think about. So let's just use non-negotiable. To the betrayer, if it keeps happening over and over again, you might tell yourself it's a non-negotiable. I cannot be in a relationship with someone who does these things to me over 100%. And over again. Mm-hmm.
And you can have a non-negotiable that says, well, if my partner cheats on me once, I'm gone. That's perfectly reasonable.
And that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yep. Absolutely. The other non-negotiables are like what I talked about with the phone. You have to figure out a way where like, okay, well, like, either I need your location or I need it. Yeah. It's perfectly healthy in the beginning stages for you for there just to be completely open transparency. I don't know exactly what that looks like for you. You can talk about that with your therapist. But another thing is if this happened at your job, you have to quit that job. That's a non-negotiable. Like, and you need to be able to say, because I've met tons of people, and they're like, yeah, my partner cheated on me, but with somebody that they work with, and they're still working with them. And I'm like, no wonder you don't feel safe. No wonder you're still having panic attacks, even though that was a year ago. No wonder you question everything, and everything is so hard now, and intimacy is really hard with them. Of course, because they didn't do the proper steps. They didn't quit that job.
Totally.
And so, you can hear how passionate I am, but it's just because
the passion is important.
I want the best relationship for you. And if you don't do the certain steps, then it's never going to happen. And one of those steps is, if you work with your affair partner,
right,
it's over. You quit that job. You quit that job out of respect for your partner that you're currently with. Anything else is just massively disrespectful.
Yeah. You want to set yourself up for success as the partner who's committed the betrayal to someone who's incurred a lot of debt, doesn't get to gamble anymore. Somebody who's incurred a lot of debt doesn't get to use a credit card anymore. Someone who, I don't know, I hate the withholding sexual intimacy example, but the partner who has committed the betrayal
need to heal
has to change something big. Really big. That's on them to change something big, not on you.
Yeah. The other things are, you have to know that this wasn't your fault. It might be easy for your brain to go, well, it's like Ricky. If you listen to Ricky long enough, you'll hear her just constantly see how she can empathize with her partner. And so you have to make sure that you're not empathizing with them to the point of like, well, maybe I'm just not pretty enough, or maybe it makes sense that we haven't been having sex recently. And no, you cannot allow yourself to go to that place where you're blaming yourself for why there is no excuse for, they could have done anything. They could have talked to you about that problem. They could have scheduled that counseling appointment, or at the very most, on the extreme side, they could have broken up with you. They could have, if things were so miserable for them that to where you're going to say, well, there wasn't a lot of bedroom time. And I guess it makes sense that they could have done 100 things that didn't involve betraying you. And so do not make excuses for them. I like that. I guess in those kind of moments, imagine you've got a little Ricky on your shoulder or a little Jimmy on your shoulder, right? And if it's a small betrayal, if it's somebody just not cleaning the litter box enough, have an extra amount of compassion. Absolutely.
Maybe they don't know what this means to me. If it's a huge betrayal like sexual infidelity, imagine a Jimmy on your shoulder saying like, you know what? There's a lot of things that you could have done wrong, but nothing that you did made you deserve what happened here. The large
100%.
Betrayals, we're not looking for excess compassion with the large betrayals. We're looking for change.
Yep. 100%. So there has to be that genuine remorse. There has to be repentance. Here's what I'm going to do differently now. Is that going to solve everything? No, of course you're going to still feel it's PTSD symptoms. You just came back from a war. Like, and so you're going to have those. And that's actually a really key point, because things will come up and we will still have to go through those safe conversations. Like, for instance, I wanted to watch the movie Minority Report. Have you ever heard of that movie with Tom Cruise?
I love that movie. I love that. It's one of my favorites.
Love that movie. It's one of my favorites, but I didn't remember certain things about it. So we sit down to watch that movie, right? And guess what the opening scene is? Do you remember? There's an opening scene.
Oh, Infidelity.
I wouldn't expect you to.
No,
Infidelity.
I do. Yeah,
I did not remember that. Oh. So you're very good. So I don't remember that. It's one of my
favorites. Yeah.
And guess what? Now it's on the screen.
Oh,
and
no.
So I do the only thing I can do, which is pause the movie and talk to my wife about how that is, what feelings are coming up. Is that triggering for her? Is that your cat?
That's my cat. It's lunchtime here in Alaska. Sorry, Jimmy. Just now I was like, do I get her away from the food bowl? And okay, sorry, folks.
So the point is there's going to be things that come up that come out of left field that trigger your partner, and it's totally normal for that to happen. But you have to handle those situations. You can't simply avoid those situations and think that everything's going to be fine. I could have easily just kept watching the movie. I could have easily been like, that was years and years and years ago. What's the point? And I'm not going to stop and have a conversation about it, because plus maybe she starts crying and now I need to start. But that's the work that you signed up for if you want this relationship to continue. And I'm not saying that would have it wasn't bad. You stop, you have that conversation. It takes 5 minutes, because, when it's years and years in the past and you've had all these mini conversations, you acknowledging that, hey, if you're feeling triggered, that makes sense. And I just want you to know, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you have to go through that. And that person can go, thanks. That is hard to watch. And it does bring up feelings, but I'm okay. And then you hug and that's it. That's the moment. You had a 2-minute moment, but not doing that causes so much more damage than doing that, than learning to do that. And if you do the steps along the way, then you can get years and years down the road and come to those moments where it's not just that scene comes up, and it doesn't cause disconnection. It actually causes more connection. That makes that person feel more safe. It's part of the rebuilding trust. You know what I mean? It adds to her trust bucket instead of takes away.
I love that. And that was such a big sentence that you said. That's part of the work that you signed up for. When you commit a big betrayal, you're signing up for years, maybe work worth of pausing the movie and asking your partner how she's doing with that scene.
100%.
And I think that's also another great time for us to remember that the Gottmans say that conflict's an opportunity for intimacy. That you stumbling upon that scene with your partner could have been a whole nother fight, reopening a fresh wound, or it can be an opportunity for you to show your partner that you care about her feelings and you know how hard that was for her. That's gorgeous. I love that. That's great, Jimmy.
Yeah. So there's a ton, there's so much that goes into this. Obviously we could spend hours talking about it, and we had so many therapy sessions talking about it. So I do it a disservice by trying to whittle it down to, 30 minutes to talk about how to heal from large betrayals. But the point is it's possible if both partners can be open and honest and express what is going on. But then at some point, after we take accountability and own our part and focus on the betrayed partner, there is a point where we do need to look at the relationship as a whole. Not because that's what caused a betrayal. That's not the way we're looking at it. We're looking at it because we don't want to go back to that old relationship. Something wasn't working. Not necessarily in our dynamic, but just in one of us. At least in one of us, something wasn't working. If a partner gets cheated on, something's not right. It doesn't mean that something's not right in the relationship. It doesn't mean that the partner. It just means I had to look at myself and the relationship dynamic, because those are both extremely important, because we don't want this to happen again. And the only way we can like prevent something from happening is by understanding, okay, well, why did this happen in the first place? Like what was going on? If we look at this, we need to look inside Jimmy. What was going on inside Jimmy? It doesn't mean it justifies what he did, but like we need to understand what was going on, or else this could happen again if we don't understand this. So we do need to look at the relationship as a whole, because the goal is not to go back to that same relationship. The goal is to create, you're creating a new relationship together. And that one is the one that has to be far more healthy and far more transparent and safe than the previous one.
Yeah. I'm worried that we've done this a disservice too, because the large repairs, it could be a 4 or 5 hour, could be its own thing.
I think we did a good job at just giving it's you can't go into every single detail, but we did cover some really important subjects on how to have those safe conversations, and what and what are some necessities to like start that process. And like we said, these people have to be, after large betrayals, you have to be in counseling. You have to be talking to a counselor. So they're going to help guide you a little bit more.
Absolutely. Maybe a little recap of the steps for folks right here at the end. We've got checking to make sure you're in a good place to repair, if you're going to have that conversation, revealing how you felt, trying not to accuse the other person of something. That's tough. Sharing your reality, be vulnerable about your triggers and your past. That's like giving your partner a little window into what's really going on. That really softens them. Owning your part of it is a great way to soften them even further. It makes it feel like it's a conversation and not just one person getting beat up, and making a plan for change. So that's great too. That's And with the large betrayals, we've got a few extra steps in there. I'd love to
Can I add one more?
An episode.
Please do. Add one more step to the large betrayals is you have to check in with each other. So part of healing is, you're having these weekly check-ins minimum, and what you're doing in those is, I'm sure we did an episode on check-ins, but you're essentially going through the same steps that we just talked about, where you're getting curious about how this partner's doing. You're validating whatever feelings are coming up for them. You're talking about anything extra that you feel like you need to do. You're talking about their stressors and anxieties, and they're practicing being open and vulnerable and honest with you, and you're practicing listening and taking accountability and showing the genuine remorse and understanding of how difficult this is. But those check-ins, when they're done right, that's what builds trust slowly, consistently over time. Because this isn't something that trust can be broken slowly over time through small betrayals, but it can also be broken in an instant through large betrayals. But the only way trust can be built, the only way it's supposed to be built, is slowly and consistently over time. And that's having those check-ins and doing them right is what helps that. So
well said. I like that. Oh, this was another good one.
This was great. Yeah.
I know.
We both have to go, but this was so great. Yeah.
I know. I hope that helps you guys a little bit. Those steps, everything that we've talked about in the episode today are things that Jimmy and I do in our own relationships, and we can testify they work well. They're helpful.
Essential.
They're essential. And that doesn't mean that you've got a partner who can go the distance, but any of these steps can help. We can be the one who gets the ball rolling in the right direction, and your partner may surprise you. Just going to throw that out there. Mine did.
Can I add one more thing? This is such an important. 1 minute, 60 seconds.
No, the end of our episodes are always totally unhinged. So
I know.
I think they're
let me just say, on account of the betrayed partner, the hardest part for you is probably going to be choosing to forgive. Because let's say that they do all the things that we talked about in this episode. They're doing all the things, and you're like, I just can't trust them ever again. I don't feel right. I don't want to be intimate with them. It's been 6 months. It's been whatever time frame. Yeah. Even if people are doing the work, I just want you to give yourself grace and compassion. If you can't, you do not need to feel obligated or shamed or guilty if you can't move on from this. When there's been a large betrayal, I mean, of course, a whole lot. I mean, different. It's different. Like I'm not, but But especially a sexual betrayal, do not feel guilty if you can't move on from that. That's not something. So one of the hardest things if you stay in that relationship is choosing to forgive. And that's so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good addition.
So,
important addition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well,
but it's
thanks.
also necessary. Yeah.
It absolutely. I want to thank everybody for joining us.
That's your choice.
Oh, look, I'm trying to wrap you up here.
I know.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm done.
Thanks everybody for listening. Yeah, till next time. And we love your episode requests. I love episode requests. It's food for thought, even if we can't do an episode on it, that does inform my content and Jimmy's content. So send us your questions, send us your thoughts. We love to hear them. Instagram's the best way to get a hold of me. I'm Anxious Hearts Guide on Instagram. Jimmy, email, is that the best way?
Just Instagram.
Find you?
No,
Instagram.
I'm not going to answer regardless. Email. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Jimmy on relationships at Gmail.
Cool. But we do. We read them. We like hearing them. So it's good to be back, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Thanks, guys.